Welcome back to Sleepy Science History. Let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered what holds this fragile little world of ours together? What keeps us safe, wrapped up like a child beneath a warm blanket, while we drift through the cold emptiness of space? Tonight, as you get comfortable, I invite you to sink into a question that sounds simple but carries the weight of the cosmos. What if Earth's core stopped burning? Now, perhaps you didn't even know Earth's core was burning. After all, it isn't fire in the way we think of logs in a fireplace or candles glowing on a birthday cake. Deep down, almost 3,000 kilometers beneath your feet, the Earth's core is made mostly of iron and nickel. It is hot beyond imagining, hotter than the surface of the sun in places, and it moves, not quickly, not with the grace of a river, but in slow, powerful currents. That restless movement powers our magnetic field, the invisible shield that has kept life possible for billions of years. But let's play with the thought. What if one night, the core simply went quiet? No heat, no motion, no heartbeat. What would happen to us, to the skies above us, and to the world we take for granted? I like to imagine the Earth as a great lantern in the dark. Its glowing heart radiates outward, keeping the shell around it alive. You don't see the flame itself, but you see its gifts. The northern lights flickering at the poles, compasses pointing north, even the simple fact that your phone doesn't get fried by a solar storm. The core is a guardian you never notice. And yet, without it, how long could we last? If you close your eyes for a moment, picture yourself standing in a wide, grassy field. Above you, the sky is painted with shimmering curtains of green, pink, and purple. They don't just hover near the poles, as they do today, but sprawl across every horizon. They are beautiful, breathtaking even, but in this imagining, they are also a warning. Without the magnetic field, charged particles from the sun pour straight into our skies. The auroras would no longer be a rare gift of the north or south. They would be a constant glow, like ghostly flames licking at the atmosphere. Would you still find them beautiful, knowing they were slowly peeling away the very air you breathe? The strange, isn't it, how something so hidden beneath our feet defines so much of our existence above the ground? The Earth's core works like a giant dynamo, an engine that hums away, unseen but essential. Without it, the protective bubble, our magnetosphere, would unravel. Imagine living without sunscreen, not just on your skin, but on the planet itself. Solar radiation would strike us directly, not all at once, not like a thunderclap, but in a slow, relentless tide. Here's where the questions deepen. Could we survive? Could clever humans build shields, domes, or underground cities to hide from the sun's fury? Or would the Earth itself begin to resemble Mars, stripped of its atmosphere, a silent, rusty desert spinning through space? And speaking of Mars, maybe you've heard that story already. Mars, too, once had a molten core. It had rivers, seas, perhaps even life. But the core cooled, the field faded, and the atmosphere slipped away. What remains is a ghost of a world, a planet whose heartbeat has gone still. Looking at Mars is a little like peeking into a possible future of our own planet if the fire at our center were to die. But wait, let's slow down. The Earth is not Mars. Our core is larger, our heat more stubborn, our shield stronger. Scientists believe it will continue for billions of years more. So why worry about such an unlikely event? Maybe because asking what if opens the door to gratitude. You look at something ordinary, a compass needle twitching, or the soft glow of the aurora borealis, and suddenly realize it's a gift from a hidden ocean of fire. Have you ever thought of your own heart this way? You don't feel it most of the time. You don't sit at your desk or lie in bed thinking, "Ah yes, my heart is pumping again. What a relief." And yet, in its quiet persistence, it defines your existence. The Earth's core is our planet's heart. Its rhythm is slower, deeper, more ancient, but without it, we would be a world without breath. So let me ask you again, what if it stopped? What if one morning you woke up and the compasses no longer pointed north, because north itself had lost meaning? What if planes and satellites faltered, their guidance gone, and the skies turned into a tapestry of fire that no one could escape? Of course, this is not a bedtime story meant to frighten you. It's more like a meditation, an invitation to marvel at the hidden machinery of the world. I like to think of the core as a storyteller itself, whispering in a language of heat and motion. Every aurora, every compass reading, every spark of life made possible by a protected planet. These are its words. And perhaps that's the wonder. Most of the time, we walk around utterly unaware of this fiery companion. We admire the stars above but forget the star we carry within. Yes, the Earth's core is a kind of star, captured and condensed, still glowing after billions of years. Doesn't that give you a strange sense of comfort, knowing that you walk each day above a hidden sun? Now imagine leaning closer to the Earth, as though you could press your ear to the ground and hear that deep thrum of molten metal turning, turning. If it were silent, would you notice the stillness right away? Or would it take time for the absence to creep in? Like the way you only realize the fridge has stopped humming when the silence becomes too loud? It's these little thought experiments that remind us how fragile and precious this planet is. When you see an aurora next, whether in pictures or, if you're lucky, in person, perhaps you'll think of it differently. Not just as a show of color in the night, but as a gentle signal from Earth's core. I am here. I am burning. I am protecting you. And so, we end this chapter not with answers but with wonder. The Earth's core still beats, still shields, still gives us the comfort of breathable skies and gentle nights. The question of what happens if it stops is less about fear and more about noticing, about remembering how easily we take for granted the silent guardians of our lives. So, before you drift into dreams, hold this thought close. Somewhere beneath your feet lies a secret ocean of fire, ancient and patient, cradling us all. And as long as it turns, we too are held. What would it feel like to live on a planet without a shield? Have you ever stepped outside on a summer day, felt the warmth of sunlight on your skin, and thought of it as both comforting and dangerous? The same star that paints your garden with life could, without warning, scorch the earth bare if not for the unseen armor we call the magnetosphere. That armor is born from deep within the Earth's core, and without it, the skies above would no longer be a safe ceiling. They would become a battlefield. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the sun not as a distant golden disk but as a roaring furnace, constantly breathing streams of charged particles into space. These winds never rest, rushing outward in all directions like invisible tides. Right now, as you sit quietly, they are flowing past you, most of them deflected by Earth's protective field. You don't feel it, you don't see it, but you are sheltered. Now, take away the magnetic field. How quickly would that solar wind reach you? How quickly would it carve away at the fragile blanket of gases that we call the atmosphere? The atmosphere itself is like the softest of fabrics, a veil just a few dozen miles thick. And yet it is the reason water flows, the reason you can breathe, the reason the world is not frozen or aflame. Without the shield of the magnetic field, the solar wind begins to tug at that veil, thread by thread. Can you picture it unraveling, slowly at first, then with more insistence? Would the skies still be blue, or would they fade into a thinner, harsher color, the way the skies of Mars now seem pale and empty? The loss wouldn't happen in a single night. It would be gradual, like a story that takes centuries to tell. But humans measure danger not only by speed but by inevitability. If you knew the air you breathe was slowly leaking away, would every inhale feel more precious? Would you stand outside and watch the heavens, wondering how long until those brilliant auroras above meant not beauty but farewell? And what of the creatures who share this planet with you? Birds, for instance, carry tiny compasses within them. They navigate by sensing the magnetic field, a talent passed down through countless generations. Without it, their great migrations would collapse. Imagine a sky where flocks spiral aimlessly, lost in the air, their ancient routes erased. Whales, too, navigate by Earth's field, their songs crossing oceans as they move along invisible highways. Without their map, would the seas fall silent, the songs forgotten? It is easy to forget that the magnetic field is not just a shield for our bodies but a guide for countless lives. Perhaps you have noticed how dependent you are on invisible systems. Your phone's GPS, the satellites orbiting above, the signals bouncing through space. All of them lean on the steadiness of Earth's magnetic field. Without it, technology would not simply stutter. it would falter in ways both subtle and profound. A lost bird can fly in circles, but what happens when a plane crosses the ocean with no compass to trust? Would travel become impossible, or would humans invent clumsy workarounds, never as graceful as the natural system we once had? The world without a burning core would still be warm at first. The mantle above would keep its heat. Volcanoes might still roar. Continents might still drift. But the deeper change would be quieter. The silence of a planet that no longer hums with protection. The sun would not have to rage to do harm. It would simply keep breathing, and in time, that breath would erode everything. Let me ask you, have you ever seen a candle flicker out in a still room? The air does not vanish when the flame dies, but something essential feels lost. The earth without its core would be like that. The seas might continue to lap at the shores, the winds might still rattle the trees, but beneath it all would be a stillness, a knowledge that the great fire had gone out. Some people like to think of Earth as a machine, full of gears and levers. Others see it as a living body, veins of magma pulsing, breath rising into storms, a heart deep below. Which image do you prefer? Whichever you choose, both tell the same truth. Remove the heart, and the rest begins to wither. Mars once had rivers wide as the Nile, deltas that spoke of long, gentle rains, perhaps even lakes where life could have flourished. This magnetic field failed, and its story changed. Today it whispers to us through dust storms and barren craters. This is what happens when the fire at the center dies. Earth, still alive, still glowing within, might follow that path one day, though not for eons. But imagining it now allows us to see Mars not as alien but as a mirror. Do you see the resemblance? Do you feel a strange kinship with a planet that lost its shield? And then there is you, the listener, safe in your chair, perhaps tucked into bed, drifting with these thoughts. How fragile does your world feel right now? Does it comfort you to know that the core is still burning, still whirling, still doing its quiet work? Or does it unsettle you to think that one day, far beyond your lifetime, this same planet might grow quiet? Here is another question. Would humans endure without their shield? We are clever, resourceful, stubborn in our survival. Perhaps domes of glass and steel could shield cities. Perhaps underground chambers could hum with artificial skies. But would those lives still feel like earthly lives? Or would they become something else entirely? Lives disconnected from the rhythms of oceans, winds, and skies? Could you still call it living on Earth if you were always hiding from the sun? The auroras would become the most haunting part. Right now, they are celebrations, rare dances of color across polar skies. Without the core, they would bloom everywhere, every night, a reminder of vulnerability. You might lie awake, looking at your ceiling, knowing the heavens above are glowing not for wonder but for warning. Would you still call them beautiful, or would they feel like fire alarms written in light? Think of the plants, too. Every leaf depends on sunlight, but not the raw, searing sunlight that would flood a shieldless earth. Photosynthesis is a delicate balance. Too little light, and life starves. Too much radiation, and cells unravel. Could forests adapt? Could grasslands endure? Or would they crisp and fade, leaving deserts where gardens once thrived? The thought turns even the greenest field into something precious, something that could be lost. And yet, even in this thought experiment, I can't help but wonder about resilience. Life has a way of surprising us. Bacteria thrive in volcanic vents. Fish swim in darkness beneath ice sheets. Tiny tardigrades endure the vacuum of space. Perhaps life would find its way even in a world where the core had gone quiet. Perhaps it would retreat underground, hiding in rock and soil, whispering in small, stubborn forms until the end of time. Would that persistence make you feel comforted? Or would it make you feel small, realizing that the Earth does not need humans to carry its story forward? In the end, the question of the core is a question of gratitude. You don't need to wait for disaster to feel wonder. The shield is here, the air is thick, the skies are blue, and every inhale is possible because beneath you molten iron is turning. The heartbeat continues. So when you step outside tomorrow and tilt your face to the sky, let yourself imagine, just for a moment, the silence of a world without it. Then breathe deeply, knowing the shield still holds, the veil is still intact, and the fire within the earth is still keeping you safe. Isn't it extraordinary that the ground beneath your feet is not just solid but alive in its own way? Isn't it humbling to realize that your safety is written not in walls or weapons, but in the slow, ancient dance of metals deep below? And perhaps that is the lesson: fragility and resilience side by side. The Earth's core could fail one day, but not today. Not in your lifetime, not in countless lifetimes. Still, imagining the loss helps you see the gift more clearly. The magnetic field is not permanent, but it is present, and presence is enough. As you drift deeper into thought, remember this: the sun will keep breathing, the winds will keep rushing, but for now, the earth still holds its shield high, still keeps the veil of atmosphere wrapped around us like a tender blanket. For tonight, at least, you are safe under its glow. What happens to the ground beneath your feet when the fire inside the earth grows still? Have you ever thought about how much of the landscape around you, mountains, valleys, volcanoes, even the soil beneath a forest, is sculpted not only by wind and rain but by the hidden furnace far below? The earth you know is not a frozen shell. It is restless, shifting, always reshaping itself with the slow patience of time. So what would change if that heat faded, if the molten metal deep inside cooled into silence? Imagine walking through a valley where once a volcano towered, smoke curling from its mouth, lava spilling like rivers of fire. Now picture that same mountain, cold and lifeless, no longer a gateway to the inner world but a monument to what used to be. Without the burning core feeding the mantle's motion, volcanoes would vanish. No fiery fountains, no new islands rising from the sea, no black sand beaches born from ash. Would the earth feel less alive, less dramatic, without its sudden bursts of creation? Perhaps you've never stood near a volcano. Still, you've likely walked across land shaped by one, whether you knew it or not. The fertile soils of farmlands often trace their richness back to volcanic ash, minerals carried upward from the deep. Without eruptions, those gifts would fade. Over time, the earth's skin would grow thinner, less fertile, its gardens less abundant. Can you imagine a world where fields grow weaker, not because farmers forget their craft but because the planet itself has stopped replenishing the soil? And then there are the mountains themselves. Have you ever gazed at a mountain range and wondered how such colossal forms came to be? They are the wrinkles of a restless earth, created by the slow grinding of tectonic plates driven by the heat of the mantle. Take away that heat and the plates stop moving. The mountains would stop rising. The Himalayas, the Andes, all the great ranges would simply begin to crumble with wind and rain, shrinking with every century. A still earth would mean an aging face, lines fading, features softening, until one day the planet was smoothed into something quieter, older, more tired. Would you miss the wild drama of cliffs and peaks? Or would you find beauty in the calm flatness of a world without upheaval? The seas, too, would feel the change. The shifting of continents has always shaped the oceans, opening them, closing them, guiding currents like invisible hands. If the plates froze in place, the seas would lose their rhythm. No new basins would form, no ancient seas would vanish. For a time it might seem peaceful, but eventually, the waters themselves would stagnate. Life in the oceans thrives on change. Nutrients stirred from the deep, coastlines redrawn, ecosystems adapting. Could the seas still teem with life if the Earth's heart no longer stirred their waters? There is something almost eerie in picturing such stillness. The Earth as we know it is a dancer, every tremor and quake a step in its ancient rhythm. To silence the core is to silence the music. No more earthquakes rolling like deep drums. No more volcanoes roaring. No more mountains pushing toward the sky. A quiet earth may sound safe, but is safety the same as life? Or does life need the drama, the unpredictability, the creation and destruction that come from a restless heart? Think of the heat itself. Even now, as you sit in comfort, the warmth rising through the ground comes not only from the sun above but from the earth below. Without the core, the deep warmth would fade. The mantle would cool, the crust would grow thicker, and slowly the earth would become like the moon, scarred, frozen, unmoving. The landscapes you see today, shaped by fire and shift, would remain but only as fossils of activity. Would you feel comforted by their permanence, or saddened that they no longer grew and changed? Consider also the creatures of this world. Some rely directly on Earth's heat, tiny organisms living near hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean. For them, the end of the core would be the end of their universe. Entire ecosystems, dazzling and strange, would vanish into darkness. And what of us, the surface dwellers? We might survive longer, but the loss would ripple into our lives in ways subtle and profound. Less fertile soil, fewer resources, oceans changing in ways we could not control. Would humanity endure, clever as always, or would we slowly fade alongside the cooling earth? And what of time itself? Human lives are brief compared to the heartbeat of a planet. The core would not cool in a single lifetime or even in 1,000. It would be a long decline, stretched across millions of years. Would future generations notice the changes? Would they tell stories of volcanoes and mountains the way we tell myths of dragons and giants? Tales of a wilder earth their eyes could no longer see? It raises another question. Do we only value what we can lose? The Earth's core burns now, giving us mountains and fertile plains, seas full of life and skies protected by its field. Yet most people never think of it. Only when imagining its silence do we notice its song. Have you felt that before in your own life? That something became precious only when you pictured it gone? There's a metaphor here, gentle but powerful. The core is hidden, unseen, almost forgotten. Yet it is the source of so much beauty. How many hidden fires keep your own life alive? How many unseen rhythms protect and guide you? Just as you rarely notice your heartbeat until it quickens, the Earth's core hums on, largely ignored, yet essential. When it is gone, the world itself will seem strangely hollow, like a song without its bass line. And yet, the thought experiment continues. If the Earth grew still, would humans learn to adapt in new ways? Perhaps new technologies would emerge, ways to mimic the dynamism the planet once provided. Maybe artificial fields, artificial heat, artificial renewal of soil and seas. But would those creations feel the same, or would they always be shadows of something greater? Could we ever replace the poetry of a mountain rising, a volcano erupting, a continent drifting across eons? It is humbling to realize how much of human history has been shaped by geology. The placement of mountains guiding where cities form, the fertility of volcanic soils feeding civilizations, the opening and closing of seas directing the spread of cultures. Without a living earth beneath us, history itself would change. Would there be fewer wars over fertile land, fewer migrations shaped by shifting continents? Or would humanity, restless by nature, create its own dramas in the absence of the planets? As you sit with this thought, picture Earth as it would look from space. Right now, it shines blue and green, white clouds swirling, storms dancing across oceans. Beneath the surface, though unseen, lies that glowing engine of molten metal. Remove it, and centuries later, the planet would still look familiar, blue, green, white. But deep down, something essential would be gone. Isn't it strange how a planet could look alive even as it slowly drifts toward silence? Maybe that is the mystery. The Earth would not collapse in a sudden blaze. It would fade quietly, almost politely. Life might cling on, civilizations might rise and fall, but the hidden fire would be absent, and in time the world would be less than it once was. And you, imagining this now, are one of the few to stop and wonder, one of the few to listen for that deep heartbeat. So let me leave you with this question. What is the worth of a fire you cannot see? The Earth's core does not glow in the night sky. It does not paint sunsets or ripple oceans. Yet without it, mountains would crumble, volcanoes would fall silent, and the seas themselves would lose their rhythm. Does that not make it one of the greatest treasures of all? Perhaps the next time you walk across a rocky path or stand at the base of a mountain, you'll think of the unseen furnace below. Perhaps you'll pause, just for a moment, to honor the fire that shapes landscapes, feeds soils, and keeps the earth alive. For even if one day it fades, today it burns, and that is enough. What would the air around you feel like if the earth's hidden fire no longer stirred the skies? Have you ever thought about how fragile our atmosphere really is? How thin and delicate, like a soap bubble hovering around the planet? We look up and see an endless blue, but in truth it is only a veil, a breath of gases stretched between us and the cold blackness of space. If the Earth's core grew still, what changes would ripple through this invisible shield that holds our lives? Picture the air as a blanket. It keeps warmth in, it shields against harsh rays, it carries every cloud, every raindrop, every breeze. Right now, the magnetic field born from the molten core keeps the sun's winds from stripping that blanket away. But if the field faded, the atmosphere would be left naked against the solar storm. Have you ever felt the wind tug at a scarf, pulling threads loose until it frays? That is how the sun would treat the atmosphere, persistent, patient, and unstoppable. At first, you might not notice. The skies would still be blue, the air still breathable, the clouds still drifting. But slowly, over centuries, the higher layers of the atmosphere would thin. The protective ozone might weaken. The upper air, the ionosphere where satellites glide, would change shape, making communication falter. Imagine every call, every broadcast, every GPS signal bending and breaking like echoes lost in a canyon. Would humanity learn to live with the silence of skies that no longer carried voices reliably? As the atmosphere thinned, radiation would creep closer. Ultraviolet light, harsher and sharper, would pierce deeper. The warmth of the sun would feel less like comfort and more like warning. Would you still stand in the sunlight as you do now, eyes closed, soaking in its glow? Or would you step into it cautiously, aware that every moment carried a price? Plants, too, would feel the difference. Their leaves, those delicate solar panels, would burn under the intensity. Crops might falter, forests might weaken, and the balance of life would tilt. Could humans adapt, building shelters and domes to guard their gardens? Or would hunger spread like a shadow across the earth? The winds themselves would grow strange. Without the steady interplay of magnetic forces, the circulation of the atmosphere might shift in ways we cannot predict. Jet streams, those invisible rivers of air, could wander from their paths. Storms might grow wilder, their shapes unrestrained. Hurricanes could carry themselves farther inland. Blizzards could strike in unexpected places. Have you ever felt the eeriness of weather that seemed out of place? A summer storm that felt like autumn, a winter day warm enough for spring? Imagine that disorientation magnified 100-fold, as the very rhythm of climate grew chaotic. And then consider the long view. Without the core to keep our shield intact, the atmosphere might not last forever. Mars once had thick air, enough to hold seas and rains. Today it has only a whisper, a thin breath unable to soften the sun's rays. Would Earth one day follow, its skies fading until they could no longer cradle clouds? Imagine looking up and seeing not blue but a pale, thin wash of color, almost transparent, the stars visible even at noon. Would that sky feel beautiful, or would it feel like loss? The climate, too, would change in profound ways. Right now, the balance between the sun's warmth and the Earth's own systems creates seasons, rains, cycles of ice and melt. Without the inner fire, volcanic activity would vanish, taking with it the gases that feed the atmosphere over time. No more carbon dioxide released from eruptions. No more slow renewal of air. At first it might seem like a gift, less volcanic ash, fewer disruptions, but in truth it would be a quiet decline. The atmosphere would lose one of its main suppliers, and over millennia, it would thin not only from erosion but from lack of replenishment. Can you imagine a world where the very breath of the planet grows faint? And what of warmth itself? The sun would still shine, of course, but without the insulating effects of a full atmosphere, temperatures might swing wildly. Days could become unbearably hot, nights bitterly cold, the balance broken. Life thrives in stability. Too much variation, and ecosystems collapse. Picture deserts spreading wider, glaciers shrinking or surging unpredictably, rainfall patterns shifting until once green lands became barren. Would humans migrate endlessly in search of balance, or would they build enclaves of artificial climate, bubbles of safety in a world gone erratic? There's another layer to ponder, the skies we take for granted. Have you ever noticed how much comfort comes from looking up and seeing familiar patterns? The gentle blue of day, the twinkling stars of night? If the atmosphere thinned, those views would change. Sunsets might lose their fiery reds and purples, as fewer particles scattered the light. The moon might appear sharper, its glow less softened by haze. Stars would shine brighter, but they would do so through a sky that felt colder, emptier, less forgiving. Would stargazing feel like wonder or like a reminder that the barrier between you and the void had grown fragile? Think also of water. The atmosphere and water are partners. One holds the other in place. Without a strong atmosphere, oceans could begin to evaporate under the sun's relentless touch. Not in a single lifetime, not in many, but slowly, steadily, seas would shrink. Rivers would dry. Clouds would fade. The cycle of rain and snow would falter. Can you picture standing on a shoreline where the ocean has retreated miles away, the sand cracked and dry, the horizon empty of waves? Would we call those places deserts? Or would we call them graves of seas? The earth without its living core would still hold air for a time, but it would be an air in retreat, an atmosphere under siege. Humanity might endure, building technologies to extend its protection, but the natural shield would be gone, and with it the certainty that the sky above was safe. Every breath would carry awareness. Every glance at the sky would remind you of its fragility. And yet, perhaps that awareness would change us. Perhaps humans would grow more reverent, more careful, knowing the atmosphere was not endless but fleeting. Would we finally treat the air as precious, not just as background? Would we breathe more slowly, more gratefully, knowing that every inhale was a gift borrowed from a dying shield? There is a strange poetry in imagining such loss. The atmosphere is our invisible companion, silent yet always present, wrapping us in its embrace. To lose it would be to lose not only protection but intimacy, the comfort of a sky that belongs to us. And so, thinking of its fragility, we come to a deeper truth, that life on Earth is not guaranteed, not permanent, but balanced on the delicate edge of forces we cannot control. So tonight, as you sit with these thoughts, let me leave you with this. Look up at the sky, notice its color, its weight, its presence. Imagine it thinner, harsher, fading. Then breathe deeply, knowing that for now, the blanket still holds, the veil is still intact, and the fire deep below is still guarding the air you carry in your lungs. Is that not a wonder worth noticing? What would human civilization look like if the world beneath us slowly lost its fire? Have you ever wondered how much of our culture, our inventions, even our myths, are tied to the living heartbeat of Earth? We build our cities, tell our stories, and imagine our futures on the foundation of a planet that still moves, still protects, still surprises us. But if that motion ended, if the shield failed and the air grew thin, how would humanity respond? Would we cling to the familiar, or would we reshape our existence into something unrecognizable? Think of the great cities that now sprawl beneath open skies. Glass towers catching the sun, crowded streets humming with energy, satellites circling overhead to guide every signal. Without the magnetic shield, without a stable atmosphere, those cities would face storms unlike any they were built to endure. Solar flares would lash at satellites, shutting down communication. Navigation would falter. Planes would hesitate to leave the ground. What happens to civilization when the invisible threads that connect us begin to fray? Would we adapt with grace, or stumble into confusion? Imagine governments meeting in hurried councils, scientists warning of the thinning skies, engineers sketching new domes and shields. Perhaps great glass canopies would rise over cities, bubbles glowing under artificial skies. Life might continue inside these structures, safe for a time, but would people feel free, or would they feel caged? Have you ever stood in a greenhouse, felt the damp air, seen the world through glass? Multiply that feeling until it covers every horizon. Would Earth still feel like home if we could only live beneath walls? Culture, too, would change. The stories we tell are shaped by the world we walk in. Once, humans told tales of fire-breathing mountains, of oceans unending, of stars hidden by clouds. In a future where the skies glow with constant auroras and the land grows harsher, new myths would emerge. Children might grow up hearing bedtime stories about the days when the sky was blue and the rains were gentle. Would those stories feel like history, or like legends too bright to believe? And then there is art. Painters have always been inspired by sunsets, poets by the turning of seasons, musicians by the rhythm of waves and winds. If those rhythms shifted, if skies turned pale and seas shrank, what kind of art would humanity create? Would our songs grow more mournful, our colors harsher, our words edged with longing? Or would we find beauty even in loss, celebrating auroras that stretched across the equator, writing poems about the strange new light of a thinner sky? Technology would surely race to keep pace with change. Artificial magnetospheres might be built, vast machines placed in orbit designed to mimic what the core once gave us freely. Perhaps they would hum faintly in the night, unseen but vital, like watchmen standing guard. Underground cities might glow with artificial suns, powered by reactors that mimic the Earth's warmth. Do you think humanity would find pride in such creations? Or would we always feel a quiet sadness that they were only replacements, not the real thing? And what of migration? As climates shifted, as fertile lands withered and seas retreated, entire populations might move in search of safety. History has always been shaped by migration, but in this imagined world, the scale would be unprecedented. Millions, perhaps billions, moving toward enclaves where technology could still hold the atmosphere at bay. Would nations dissolve under the weight of such movement, or would humanity learn, at last, to live as one species rather than divided tribes? Religion and philosophy would not remain untouched. Humans have always looked to the heavens for meaning. In a world where the skies burned with constant auroras and radiation crept through the thinning air, new beliefs would arise. Some might see the fading core as punishment, others as a test. Some might worship the last remnants of fire deep below, imagining it as a deity growing weaker. Have you ever noticed how people give meaning to what they fear losing? Perhaps the cooling of the earth would spark a new reverence, a spiritual return to gratitude for the planet itself. Education, too, would shift. Children might not study the geography we know today. Instead, their maps would show the safest zones, the domed cities, the protected seas. Their science lessons would explain not how the earth moves but how it once moved, like teaching about extinct animals. Once, a teacher might say, the continents drifted. Once, volcanoes erupted. Once, mountains grew. Would students feel awe, or would they shrug, unable to imagine such a restless earth? And then, inevitably, there is the question of space. If Earth grew hostile, would humanity finally leap outward, building new homes on other planets or moons? The irony is sharp. Mars, once alive with its own core, now stands as a husk. Would we attempt to build what Mars lost, creating shields and atmospheres by hand, chasing a dream of renewal? Or would we carry Earth's lesson with us, knowing how fragile fire can be, how temporary even the most solid world truly is? But let's return for a moment to the ordinary person, someone like you. Imagine stepping outside into a future Earth where the air feels thinner, the sky sharper. You might wear protective gear against radiation. You might glance upward at auroras that never fade. What would daily life feel like? Would you still sip coffee on a porch, still walk through a park, still read under a tree? Or would those simple acts vanish, replaced by life indoors, protected, controlled? If that were the case, would you still feel human? Or would humanity itself become something new, creatures of glass domes and artificial suns? Even humor might change. Have you noticed how often jokes draw on shared experience? Weather, seasons, sunlight, rain? In a world where the weather grew chaotic, where seasons blurred, would laughter carry the same weight? Perhaps new forms of humor would rise, jokes about domes and shields, light-hearted stories about the stubbornness of people who still tried to plant gardens outdoors. Even in hardship, humanity would find ways to laugh, because laughter is a shield too. Economies would twist with the changes. Crops failing would lead to new technologies for food, hydroponic towers, underground farms glowing with LED suns. Trade routes would shift as seas retreated. Entire industries might grow around artificial protection, selling not luxuries but survival. Would wealth still mean what it means today, or would true wealth be measured in air, water, and access to safe land? Perhaps money itself would become irrelevant, replaced by direct exchange of essentials. In all of this, the most haunting question remains. Would humans feel at home on a planet slowly losing its heartbeat? Or would they always feel like tenants in a house collapsing around them, scrambling to repair walls while the foundation crumbled? Home is more than shelter. It is comfort, belonging. Could Earth still feel like home if it was fading before our eyes? And yet, there is another possibility. Perhaps the very act of struggle would draw people closer together. Perhaps culture would grow deeper, art more poignant, community stronger. Sometimes hardship sharpens gratitude, making every shared meal, every safe breath, every glimpse of beauty more meaningful. Could it be that in losing the fire below, we would discover a fire within ourselves, one of resilience, creativity, and connection? So let me ask you, do you think civilization would crumble under the weight of a silent Earth? Or would it transform, becoming something new, something perhaps even stronger? History shows that humanity has never stood still. We adapt, we invent, we endure. The cooling of the core might not end us, but it would certainly change us. And in that change, we might glimpse truths about ourselves we never noticed when the Earth was still alive and burning beneath our feet. For tonight, let that question linger. How would you live if the ground itself stopped giving? Would you mourn what was lost? Or would you build something new? Maybe the answer lies not only in the Earth's fire but in your own. What would become of the countless other lives that share this planet with us if the Earth's hidden fire were to fade? Have you ever paused to think of how many creatures are tied, invisibly yet firmly, to the restless energy of the core beneath our feet? Not only humans lean on its shield, its warmth, its stirring of seas and soils. Every bird, every whale, every insect, every tree carries within it the imprint of a planet still alive. So if the core cooled, if the magnetic field faltered and the atmosphere began to thin, how would the great tapestry of life respond? Picture a forest at dawn. The leaves stretch upward towards sunlight, birds stir in the branches, insects hum quietly in the air. Now imagine that sunlight growing sharper, more punishing, as radiation begins to slip through a weakening sky. The leaves that once thrived under gentle light would burn at their edges. Birds that once followed invisible paths written by the magnetic field would turn in confused circles, their ancient routes erased. Insects, those tireless pollinators, would falter, their fragile bodies too exposed to survive the harsher rays. What happens to a forest when every thread in its web begins to fray at once? Consider the oceans. Beneath their waves lies another hidden world, one as complex and vibrant as any jungle. Entire ecosystems cluster around hydrothermal vents, cracks in the seafloor where the Earth's heat seeps upward. Bacteria thrive there, feeding on chemicals released from the depths, and larger creatures, giant tube worms, ghostly shrimp, strange fish, depend on those bacteria. If the Earth's core cooled, those vents would darken, their heat gone. An entire branch of life, ancient and strange, would vanish in silence. Have you ever thought of how many lives exist in places you will never see? Lives depending on the fire you never notice? But the surface seas would suffer too. Without the magnetic shield, radiation would penetrate the upper layers, changing the delicate balance of plankton. These tiny drifters, invisible to the naked eye, are the lungs of the Earth, producing most of the oxygen you breathe. If they faltered, if their numbers shrank, the air itself would thin more quickly. It is humbling, isn't it, to realize that your breath depends on creatures so small you could hold 1,000 in a drop of water? And it is sobering to imagine those creatures weakened by a sky that no longer protects them. Migration patterns would unravel. Birds, whales, turtles, all use the magnetic field as a compass. Take it away, and their journeys would lose direction. A whale might set out across the Pacific and never find the breeding grounds its ancestors returned to for centuries. A turtle might hatch on a beach and wander aimlessly instead of finding its way to the open sea. Have you ever felt lost on a road without signs, unsure which way to turn? Imagine that feeling magnified until it became a permanent state, an erasure of instinct itself. That is what countless species would face. Predators would falter too. If prey animals lost their patterns, if migrations collapsed, hunters would starve. Wolves waiting for caribou, sharks searching for schools of fish, eagles scanning skies that once teemed with birds. All would find their rhythms broken. A chain reaction would ripple outward, thinning populations, collapsing ecosystems. And yet, in that collapse, some opportunists would thrive. Species that adapt quickly, rats, cockroaches, hardy weeds, might spread further, filling the gaps left by more delicate beings. Would the Earth become less diverse, less colorful, more dominated by the stubborn few? Plants would feel the thinning atmosphere most directly. Radiation burns leaves, disrupts growth, mutates seeds. Crops would fail first, and with them the animals and humans who depend on them. Wild plants, too, would shrink back, their ranges shrinking, their forms changing. Imagine fields where wheat once rippled in golden waves now lying bare, or jungles that once sang with life now reduced to shadowed husks. Would any landscapes remain lush, or would deserts spread across the continents, carried on the winds of change? And yet, life is not only fragile, it is also endlessly inventive. When great die-offs have struck in the past, survivors have always found ways to adapt. Could some plants evolve thicker leaves, resistant to radiation? Could some animals burrow deeper, living mostly underground? Could ocean creatures retreat to deeper waters, hiding from the sun's sharper gaze? Life has reinvented itself countless times before. Perhaps it would again. Do you find comfort in that possibility? Or does it make the loss of today's richness feel even sharper, knowing how much might vanish before something new arose? Think of insects, small but vital. Bees, already fragile in our own time, could not endure such shifts. Their loss would take with it countless flowering plants. Butterflies, with wings too delicate to withstand radiation, would vanish too. The skies would grow quieter, the fields less colorful. Can you imagine spring without the hum of bees? Summer without the drift of butterflies? Would flowers seem lonely without their companions, blooming briefly and then fading into silence? Amphibians, those creatures of both water and land, would struggle as well. Sensitive to even slight changes, they are early victims of any disruption. Frogs, salamanders, newts, all could vanish quickly, their calls silenced in ponds and forests. Their absence would echo outward, reshaping food webs. And reptiles, though tougher, might not withstand the cooling Earth's shifts in climate. Some might linger, but their great migrations and ancient cycles would falter. Mammals, including humans, would endure longer, protected by intelligence, by tools, by adaptation. But the animals that now fill the Earth with diversity, herds on plains, predators in forests, creatures of every shape and sound, would dwindle. The world could grow quieter, emptier, stripped of the variety that makes it alive. Have you ever walked through a place that once bustled with voices, only to find it abandoned, every echo gone? That is how the Earth might feel, a stage with fewer and fewer actors. Still, not all would be silence. Bacteria, hardy and adaptable, would survive. In the soil, in the oceans, deep within rocks, they would persist. Perhaps they would even thrive, filling niches left empty. Over millions of years, new forms of life could arise from these survivors, shaped by the harsher world. The Earth might not die, but it would be transformed beyond recognition. Would future beings, if they came to exist, look back at fossils of today's creatures and wonder at a world so different from their own? And where would humans fit into this new tapestry? Would we try to preserve every species we could, building vaults of seeds, arks of animals, archives of DNA? Or would we let go, focusing only on our own survival, leaving much of the natural world behind? It is a hard question, but one that echoes through history. Do we see ourselves as part of life's web, or as its master? Even pets, those closest to us, would feel the shift. Dogs, cats, horses, animals tied to our lives would depend on our ability to shield them. Would we carry them with us into domed cities, into underground shelters, preserving companionship as well as survival? Or would only a few endure, shaping a new bond with humans in a harsher age? Imagine a child in such a future, growing up with no birdsong outside the window, no insects buzzing in the garden, perhaps only a single dog or cat by their side. Would they know what has been lost, or would they only know the world as it is? And yet, perhaps life's fragility could inspire greater care. If humans saw species vanish one by one, perhaps they would begin to value the survivors more deeply. Perhaps conservation would become not a choice but a necessity, a reverence woven into every culture. Would the loss of abundance teach us, at last, how to live with gratitude? The Earth's biosphere is a symphony, every species an instrument. To lose the core's fire would be to lose the conductor, the rhythm that holds it all together. The music would not stop immediately, but it would falter, instruments dropping away, melodies fading, until only a thin, haunting tune remained. Can you hear it, that quiet song of survival, stripped of harmony but still carrying on? So let this question linger. What is the measure of life's resilience? Is it the abundance we see now, the dazzling variety of forests and seas, or is it the quiet persistence of something, anything, surviving against impossible odds? The cooling of the Earth's core would not erase life entirely, but it would test its limits, sculpting a new world from loss and endurance. And in imagining that, perhaps we glimpse the true wonder of the biosphere. Not that it is permanent, but that it is endlessly, stubbornly alive. What does it mean for a planet to lose its fire in the vast silence of the cosmos? Have you ever looked up at the night sky and wondered whether Earth is unusual, or merely one of countless worlds that rise and fade in turn? Stars burn, planets spin, moons circle, and across billions of years, each follows its own rhythm. If Earth's core fell quiet, would the universe even notice? Or would it be only another note in an endless symphony of beginnings and endings? Imagine standing on a hill at night, the sky clear, the stars scattered like dust. Each star may carry its own worlds, some perhaps alive, some long dead. Our planet, small and fragile, burns within not only with sunlight, but with its own hidden furnace. That inner fire is part of what made Earth special. A world that could hold oceans, cradle life, shield its surface. But other planets too once carried fire. Mars, Mercury, even the Moon, they all tell stories of cores that cooled, magnetic fields that faded. Earth is not the first to face this fate. Have you ever thought of how much of our planet's story is written not only in its own soil but in the skies above, where other worlds show us what may come? Mars is perhaps the most haunting mirror. Long ago, rivers cut its surface, deltas formed, rain fell. It had a shield like ours, born from a molten core, but the shield failed, and the sun stripped its air. Today Mars is silent, a desert under thin skies. If Earth's fire went out, we would join Mars in that long stillness. Do you ever look at Mars through a telescope or in photographs and feel as though you're looking at a possible future, one waiting quietly for us to arrive? And then there is Venus, Earth's twin in size and composition. Its core may still move, but its fate was different. A runaway greenhouse effect turned its skies into suffocating heat, its surface into molten plains. Where Mars froze, Venus burned. Earth's fire, balanced with water and air, has so far kept us between those extremes. But the balance is delicate, fragile. Have you ever realized how rare it is for a planet to sit in that thin strip of possibility? Not too hot, not too cold, not too still. When you imagine Earth's core cooling, it is tempting to think of it only as a local tragedy. Forests withering, seas retreating, skies thinning. But zoom out and the story becomes cosmic. Stars are born and die, galaxies turn like whirlpools, entire solar systems rise and fall. Planets like ours may be common, but how many keep their fire long enough for life to bloom? And how many lose it before life can reach its full song? Does the silence of other worlds make our own fire feel more precious? Think, too, of Earth's place in time. The sun itself will one day change, swelling into a red giant, stripping planets bare. In that grand arc, the cooling of the Earth's core might seem small, just another step in a longer decline. And yet, for us, it would be everything. To a star, a planet's silence may mean little, but to the creatures that walked its soil, it would mean the end of a world. Do you ever feel the tension between those scales, the vast indifference of the cosmos and the deep intimacy of life's small struggles? Perhaps there is comfort in knowing we are not alone in this story. The moon, our closest companion, is already a cooled world. Its core is long silent, its surface frozen in place. The dark seas we see are ancient lava plains, but no new eruptions rise. When you look at the moon, you are seeing what Earth might become. A body without heartbeat, locked in stillness, its surface a record of what once was. Do you ever feel that the moon is more than a neighbor, that it is a reminder of what waits ahead? And yet, in that silence, there is beauty. The moon does not live, but it still shines. Mars does not breathe, but its canyons and mountains awe us. Even Venus, harsh and hostile, glows like a lantern in our skies. Perhaps Earth too, if it cooled, would still be beautiful, a blue and white marble for a time. Then something else, a quieter world, perhaps barren, but still turning under the stars. Beauty does not always need life to exist. But do you think beauty feels different when it cannot be witnessed, when no eyes remain to see it? The cosmic scale also raises another question. If Earth grew silent, might life find refuge elsewhere? Not necessarily among the stars, but perhaps on moons like Europa or Enceladus, where subsurface oceans are heated not by molten cores but by tidal forces. These worlds remind us that Earth's way is not the only way. Life may not need fire in the same form we know it. Have you considered that perhaps the universe is full of hidden biospheres, thriving in ways utterly unlike our own, while Earth's fire is only one version of the story? Still, for us, the loss would be personal. Our myths, our histories, our songs are tied to Earth. We speak of mountains, of seas, of winds. Our constellations are mapped from this particular vantage point, our gods tied to this sky, our hearts attuned to this soil. If Earth's core cooled, we might travel elsewhere. But would those new worlds ever feel like home? Have you ever left a familiar place and found that, no matter how beautiful the new one was, a part of you still longed for what you left behind? Imagine that longing stretched across light years, carrying Earth's memory into the stars. And then there is the question of meaning. Does the universe care whether Earth burns within or grows cold? Likely not. Yet meaning is not given by the cosmos. It is created by those who ask the question. If humans survive long enough to watch the Earth grow silent, they may write stories about it, sing songs of remembrance, build monuments to the fire that once protected them. In that act, they would give the silence meaning. Do you believe meaning is something we find or something we make? There is a strange comfort in knowing that we are part of a larger cycle. Just as stars are born, shine, and fade, so too do planets. Earth's fire will not last forever, but neither does any flame. What matters, perhaps, is not the length of the burning but what it allowed. Without the core, no shield. Without the shield, no atmosphere. Without the atmosphere, no seas, no forests, no life. And yet, here you are, breathing, listening, wondering. Isn't it astonishing that for this brief window, the fire has burned long enough for you to exist? So the cosmic perspective teaches us humility. Earth is not eternal. This fire is not permanent. But it is enough. Enough for life to flourish, for civilizations to rise, for stories to be told under the stars. Perhaps one day, long after the fire is gone, another species on another world will wonder about us, just as we wonder about Mars or the moon. Perhaps they will ask what it was like to live on a world with a living core, to walk under skies thick with air, to hear oceans crash against shores. And in their wonder, we will live again, if only as memory. So when you look up at the stars tonight, let yourself feel both small and vast. Small because Earth is only one planet among billions. Vast because your thoughts reach across that immensity, asking questions that connect you to it all. If Earth's core cooled tomorrow, the sun would still rise, the stars would still burn, the galaxies would still turn. The universe would continue. But for you, for us, the silence would mean everything. Isn't that the paradox, that in the grandest scale we are tiny, and yet in our own scale we hold entire worlds of meaning? And perhaps that is the lesson. The Earth's fire is cosmic in origin, born of the same processes that shape stars and planets across the galaxy. The silence will one day be cosmic, too. But in between, it is human. It is forests, oceans, laughter, sorrow, music, love. It is the brief flame of consciousness asking what it all means. And in that asking, in that wondering, perhaps we burn brighter than any core ever could. What kinds of stories would people tell if the earth began to lose its fire? Have you ever noticed how myth and memory shape themselves around the mysteries of the natural world? Ancient people looked to volcanoes and saw gods breathing fire. They looked to lightning and heard the anger of spirits. They looked to the stars and drew maps of destiny. If the earth's core went silent, if its shield began to fade, what new myths would rise to explain the changes? Would we weave tales of mourning or of resilience? Imagine children growing up in a world where auroras no longer flickered only at the poles but spread across every sky. At first, perhaps, scientists would explain the physics, the loss of the magnetic field, the solar wind colliding with the atmosphere. But for a child, what would linger is the vision. Green rivers of light flowing above their home every night. Would those children grow up believing the heavens were alive, painted each evening by unseen hands? Might auroras become sacred, a reminder of a planet both fragile and wondrous? Think of the power of stories to soften fear. In times of drought, people once prayed to sky gods for rain. In times of plague, they spoke of curses or lessons from beyond. If the earth's core cooled, thinning the skies, causing crops to fail, animals to wander lost, humans would not only measure these changes with instruments, they would tell stories. Would they imagine the earth as a great being whose heart was failing, whose pulse was slowing? Would they invent rituals to honor the dying fire, singing songs to coax it back to life? Even now, our myths are filled with images of fire, Prometheus stealing flame for humanity, dragons coiling in caverns, phoenixes burning to be reborn. Fire has always meant more than heat. It means spirit, energy, will. If Earth's inner fire dimmed, might we reimagine those old tales, seeing them not as fables but as reflections of a planetary truth? Could the loss of the core's flame inspire a mythology where humans, not gods, must carry the torch forward, building artificial suns, crafting shields, becoming keepers of a fire that nature no longer provides? And then there are dreams. Have you ever noticed how your mind weaves fears and wonders into images while you sleep? Imagine a generation dreaming of falling skies, of endless auroras, of seas retreating into silence. Over time, such dreams would seep into culture, shaping art, poetry, even religion. Perhaps prophets would rise, speaking of visions where the earth whispered its farewell. Perhaps artists would paint endless skies of light, canvases shimmering with greens and purples, capturing not only beauty but grief. In such a world, memory itself would transform. Elders would tell stories of when skies were blue, when compasses worked, when birds flew without confusion. Younger generations might listen with disbelief, the way we now listen to myths of golden ages. Would the time of the blue sky become a legendary era, half history, half dream? Can you imagine what it would feel like to live in a world where the very air your ancestors breathed was remembered as something almost magical? Rituals would grow around these losses. Perhaps people would gather each year to honor the earth's core, even though it no longer burned as it once did. They might light fires on mountaintops, symbolic flames to echo the vanished one below. They might write prayers to the earth itself, thanking it for the billions of years of protection it once gave. Do you think such rituals would bring comfort, or would they feel like mourning songs, reminders of what could never return? And yet, myth is not only about grief. It is also about hope. As long as people tell stories, they weave futures as well as pasts. Maybe, in imagining Earth's silence, humans would invent tales of rebirth, that one day the core would stir again, that the fire would return. Perhaps children would be told bedtime stories of a sleeping giant at the planet's center, resting, not dead, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Would such stories bring comfort, or would they create longing for something that could never come? Consider how myths shape identity. A people who see the earth as a wounded parent might learn to live with reverence, taking less, wasting little, honoring the remnants of a fragile biosphere. A people who see the earth as a fallen god might strive endlessly to rebuild, to prove themselves worthy successors. Stories do not merely explain the world. They shape how we act within it. If humanity faced the cooling of the earth, which path do you think our stories would take, humility or ambition? Language itself might change. Words for seasons, winds, rains could fade if those patterns vanished. New words might arise for constant auroras, for skies stripped thin, for soil that no longer renews itself. Poetry would adapt, describing not blue mornings but pale skies, not gentle rains but storms untethered from rhythm. Have you ever noticed how words grow from what we see, what we live? If what we see changes, so too must our language. Would you recognize your own tongue centuries later, reshaped by a world transformed? Even music could shift. Many of our rhythms mimic nature, the steady beat of waves, the cycles of birdsong, the rise and fall of storms. In a quieter, harsher earth, music might grow slower, heavier, reflecting loss. Or perhaps it would become brighter, more defiant, insisting on joy in the face of fading fire. What kind of songs would you want to sing if the earth were growing silent? Would you choose laments or anthems of resilience? Art, too, would hold memory. Murals might depict volcanoes that no longer erupt, mountains that no longer rise, skies that once glowed with simple blue. Future generations might walk through galleries and see these works as windows into a mythic past. Have you ever stood before an ancient painting and felt both awe and distance, aware that the world it depicts no longer exists? Imagine that feeling applied not to centuries but to the very planet itself. And then there is the human need to find meaning in endings. If the Earth's core cooled, humanity might not survive forever. But in the face of decline, stories could offer solace. Myths might frame the loss not as failure but as cycle. Just as stars burn out and new stars are born, so too do planets live and die. To live within that story is to be part of something greater, not abandoned but embraced by the rhythm of the cosmos. Would you find peace in such a tale, or would it make the loss feel sharper, more inevitable? Even science, in such a future, would carry myth within it. Children might study geology as the story of a once-living Earth, its dynamo long gone. Scientists might be revered not only as seekers of truth but as keepers of memory, storytellers of a fire no one could see anymore. In their equations and models, myths of the core's fading might mingle with facts. And perhaps that blending is not a flaw but a reminder that humans need both knowledge and meaning to navigate change. So let me ask you this. If you were one of those future storytellers, living on a planet whose heart had grown cold, how would you describe it? Would you tell tales of grief, of what was lost? Or would you tell tales of gratitude, of the billions of years the Earth gave us? Would you speak of the auroras as warnings, or as blessings? Would you remember the fire as something that abandoned us, or as a gift that allowed us to exist at all? In the end, myths are not about the Earth, they are about us. They are mirrors of our fears, our hopes, our longing to find meaning in a vast and indifferent universe. If Earth's core cooled, the myths we told would not bring the fire back, but they would keep its memory alive. And perhaps that is enough. For as long as we tell stories, we carry the fire within us, even when the planet's fire is gone. So the question lingers, what stories will we choose? Ones that chain us to despair, or ones that ignite resilience? The Earth may one day fall silent, but in our telling, in our dreaming, in our myths, its voice can continue. And maybe that is the truest form of immortality, not a fire that burns forever, but a fire that is remembered, retold, reborn in every word. How would your daily life feel if the Earth slowly lost its fire? Not the grand sweep of civilizations, not the mythologies of nations, but the small rhythms of morning and evening, the ordinary moments that shape a single human life. Would you wake to the same comforts, or would each day carry a subtle weight, a reminder of the thinning sky above and the silence below? Imagine rising from your bed and stepping toward a window. The light outside is different now. The auroras shimmer even at dawn, faint ribbons that never leave the heavens. The sky no longer holds its deep, steady blue but a thinner, sharper color, almost washed pale. Would you feel wonder every time you saw it? Or would it grow ordinary, as familiar as clouds once were? Perhaps you'd keep a memory tucked in your mind of old skies described by grandparents. Skies full of gentle hues, and compare them with the restless light you now live beneath. You walk outside, but the air feels different. Maybe a little thinner, a little drier. You breathe deeply, grateful still for oxygen. But there is a slight strain, like climbing a hill when you are tired. Would every breath remind you of fragility? Would walking to a garden or marketplace feel like a gift? Or would it feel like risk under the harsher radiation of the sun? Perhaps you'd wear protective clothing, lightweight but necessary. A daily reminder that the world itself was no longer as safe as it once was. Consider food. The simple act of preparing a meal would change. Crops are harder to grow now. Fields no longer thrive as they did, and soils without volcanic renewal yield less. Much of what you eat may come from indoor farms, stacked towers glowing with artificial lights, plants fed by careful systems rather than by rain and soil. Would you miss the taste of food grown under open skies? Or would the new methods become the flavor of your age, familiar to you as sunlight-fed crops once were to your ancestors? Even water would feel different. Rivers and lakes might shrink, and clean water would be rationed carefully. You might draw water from purification systems rather than streams. The simple act of filling a glass would remind you of scarcity. Do you think you would drink more slowly, savoring each sip, aware that it was not endless? Perhaps entire rituals would form around water, meals beginning not with bread but with a moment of gratitude for a clear glass of it. And what of work? Many jobs might shift indoors, beneath protective domes, or underground where shielding is stronger. Fields of outdoor labor would be rare, replaced by controlled environments. Perhaps your work would involve maintaining those shields, tending indoor gardens, or monitoring artificial systems that mimic the old rhythms of Earth. Would you feel proud to help keep humanity alive? Or would you long for simpler work, the kind that once tied people directly to soil and weather? Children, of course, would grow up differently. Their playgrounds might be enclosed, their games beneath protective ceilings painted to resemble skies. Do you think they would miss the open air, or would they know only what they grew up with? Perhaps they would hear tales of open fields and oceans without barriers and think of them as myths, stories too vast to believe. Would they envy the past, or would they adapt with joy, laughing beneath artificial skies just as freely as children once did under real ones? Leisure, too, would change. Where once you might walk through a park or lie in the grass, you might now visit indoor spaces designed to mimic nature. Gardens beneath glass, pools lit with artificial sunlight. Perhaps you would still find beauty there, but would it feel the same? Have you ever walked through a greenhouse and felt both awe and a faint sadness, knowing it was only a fragment of something greater? That might become the shape of everyday joy in a world where Earth itself could no longer give freely. Relationships would deepen under such conditions. Families might gather more closely, communities leaning on one another in ways once forgotten. Scarcity has a way of sharpening connection. Would you cherish the company of friends more, knowing that survival was not only about technology but about trust, cooperation, and care? Perhaps songs, meals, and shared stories would become more precious, no longer background to life but its heart. And yet, solitude would change as well. To walk alone outdoors might become rare, even dangerous. The silence of a thinning world could weigh on you, every step a reminder of loss. Would you find peace in that solitude? Or would it feel heavier than before? Too quiet, too empty? Perhaps new forms of meditation would arise, practices that helped people find comfort in the altered sky, teaching them to see beauty in what remained. Consider how sleep itself might shift. Nights under constant auroras could feel strange, the darkness never complete. Would you close your eyes and dream differently, your subconscious filled with shimmering skies and restless light? Or would the human mind adapt, folding the constant glow into its rhythm, dreaming still of forests, seas, and skies remembered only in story? Festivals would not disappear, but they would transform. Where once communities gathered for harvest or for the turning of seasons, now they might celebrate survival itself. Another year of protected skies, another year of crops grown indoors, another year of holding on. Would those festivals feel more solemn or more joyful because they carried gratitude sharper than before? Imagine lanterns released into enclosed domes, music echoing against protective walls, dances performed in honor of a fire that no longer burns below. Would you not find a strange beauty in such resilience? Even love would be touched by the change. Courtship might include promises not only of devotion but of care, of survival together in a world less forgiving. Couples might share dreams of building safe spaces for families, of protecting children under fragile skies. Have you noticed how love adapts to circumstance? How it always finds a way to express itself? In a fading earth, perhaps love would glow even brighter, an ember kept alive against the cold. And as for death, how would it be honored? Perhaps funerals would not only mourn individuals but also acknowledge the fragility of all life. Rituals might speak of returning to the earth not as renewal but as remembrance, offering gratitude to a planet that gave life even as it slowly withdrew it. Cemeteries might be built beneath protective domes, places of memory as much for the earth itself as for its people. Would grieving feel heavier, or would it be softened by a shared sense of endurance? Through it all, daily life would still contain small joys. A shared meal, a child's laughter, a moment of silence beneath auroras. Even as the earth cooled, people would find ways to live, to create beauty, to find meaning. Have you noticed that even in hardship, humans always seek moments of wonder? A flower blooming, a song sung, a hand held? That would not vanish. If anything, it might grow stronger. So ask yourself, how would you live if every day carried the awareness that the world was fading? Would you despair? Or would you savor each moment more deeply? Would you cling to memories of the past? Or would you build new joys in the present? Perhaps the greatest gift of imagining such a world is realizing that even now, when the earth still burns within, you already have the chance to live with that awareness, to treat every breath, every sky, every companion as precious. The loss of the Earth's fire would not only reshape civilizations or ecosystems, it would reshape the small, intimate details of human life. Meals, laughter, rituals, dreams. And in those details, perhaps, lies the truest story of what it means to live on a fragile planet. For even as the core cooled, even as the shield faded, people would still rise each morning, still breathe, still love, still hope. Isn't that what it means to be human, to carry fire within, even when the fire below is gone? What does it mean to live in a world that was never meant to last forever? Have you ever thought about how fragile everything truly is? Mountains, seas, skies, even the very heart of the earth? We walk across the ground as if it were eternal, but deep within it a clock is always ticking, the slow cooling of a fire that once lit the way for all life. If that fire one day fades, what should we make of the time we still have? Imagine standing barefoot on the soil. You feel the firmness beneath you, but you also know that beneath that crust lies motion, warmth, a restlessness that shaped continents and shielded skies. That restlessness will not last forever. But neither do seasons, nor lives, nor even stars. Perhaps the real question is not how long the fire will burn, but how we choose to live while it does. Do you ever find yourself treasuring a moment more when you know it is fleeting? A sunset, a song, a laugh? Could the earth itself be seen in the same way, as a fleeting miracle meant to be cherished precisely because it is impermanent? The thought of impermanence can feel heavy. If mountains crumble, if seas retreat, if skies thin, what hope is there? And yet, impermanence is also what makes beauty possible. Flowers bloom because they fade. Rivers carve valleys because they flow away. The earth's fire has always been temporary, but in its time it has given birth to forests, oceans, creatures, civilizations. Isn't there a kind of grace in that, a reminder that transience and wonder are two sides of the same truth? Think of how fragile life is, and yet how stubborn. Again and again, through extinctions and upheavals, something survives. The earth's fire may cool, but as long as it burns, life will carry forward. And when it no longer burns, life may carry forward elsewhere. In new forms, new places, perhaps even in the stars. Do you find comfort in knowing that you are part of this persistence, that your very existence is proof of resilience carried through billions of years? And what of gratitude? It is easy to walk through life forgetting the quiet gifts beneath your feet, the shield above, the fertile soil, the steady air. But imagining their absence reveals their value. Would you not breathe more deeply knowing the atmosphere is a gift of the core's turning? Would you not look at the auroras differently, knowing they are whispers of a fire protecting you from an endless storm? What if every sunrise became, in your eyes, not just routine but extraordinary, a promise renewed by a planet still alive within? Perhaps the deepest lesson is that fragility is not weakness. The Earth is fragile, yes, but in its fragility it has nurtured complexity, beauty, and life. Fragility is what makes something worth protecting, worth loving. Have you ever held something delicate? A seashell, a bird's feather, a flower, and felt a surge of care precisely because you knew it could break? The Earth is like that, a treasure not because it is unbreakable, but because it is breakable and yet it endures. Now picture the future far beyond your lifetime. The core has cooled, the shield is gone, the skies are thin. Earth is quiet, a world of memory. Perhaps no humans walk its surface. Perhaps no creatures breathe its air. And yet, even then, the story of Earth will not be erased. Fossils will remain. Ruins will remain. The silent traces of a world that once burned brightly. Do you think another being, from another place, might find those traces one day and wonder at the fire that once lived here? Would they see Earth not as a lost world, but as a testament to how fragile fire can still give rise to endless forms of life? But before that distant future comes, there is the present. Your life, right now, beneath skies still blue, oceans still full, forests still breathing. The Earth's fire is still alive. The shield still holds. The soil still feeds. Isn't it astonishing that we are here in this brief moment, at the peak of possibility, able to ask these questions, able to marvel at what lies beneath our feet? So what do we do with this awareness? Perhaps the answer is simple. We live fully. We love deeply. We protect what we can. We treat the Earth not as permanent property but as a fleeting companion, a host whose generosity is immense but not eternal. Do you not feel a deeper tenderness for it when you think of it this way, as something to care for while it lasts? Even the thought of endings need not be only sorrow. Endings give shape to stories. Without endings, nothing has meaning. The Earth's fire will one day end, but that does not diminish its worth. It magnifies it. In knowing it is finite, we see it as precious. Just as you treasure a single day more when you know it will pass, so too can we treasure a planet more when we know its fire will not burn forever. And so the final question is not, what if the Earth's core stops burning? But, what will we do while it still burns? Will we waste its gifts? Or will we live with gratitude? Will we see ourselves as separate from it, or as threads in the same fragile tapestry? Will we let fear of the future weigh us down, or will we let awareness of impermanence awaken us to the beauty of the present? When you lie down tonight, perhaps you will think of the fire beneath you, a fire you cannot see but that cradles your existence. Perhaps you will imagine it as a heartbeat, deep and ancient, steady and slow. And perhaps you will find comfort in its rhythm, not because it will last forever, but because it lasts now. One day the Earth will grow quiet. One day the shield will fall. One day the skies will fade. But today, the fire still turns, the auroras still shimmer, the seas still breathe, and you are alive within it. And that, in itself, is enough. So the story closes not with despair but with gratitude. The Earth's core burns still, gifting us breath, soil, sky, and time. To live in its warmth is to be part of something rare, something fragile, something extraordinary. And perhaps the truest way to honor the fire is simply to notice it, to whisper thank you, and to live as though every moment beneath its glow is a miracle, because it is.